Well, I've come down here to the bean patch on what is a beautiful sunny autumn afternoon in Tasmania. And what I'm doing this afternoon is harvesting these Borlotti beans. If you may recall, if you've seen earlier videos, I planted red kidney beans and Borlotti beans in the spring with the goal of giving me some dried legumes. Now, the red kidney beans I harvested, well, probably 2, maybe 3 weeks ago now, because they were ready and there was some rain coming, so I got those out. They haven't been processed though, they're still in pods, and the processing to separate them from the pods still needs to be done. At the time, these Borlotti beans weren't ready to harvest. There was still quite a few where the pods hadn't dried sufficiently, and you need to have nice dry pods to ensure that the beans themselves are dry enough and mature enough to process. So I've had to wait a couple of weeks, and again there is more rain expected in a couple of days time, so a day like today when it's nice and sunny and dry is a great time to harvest. Now, with both the Borlotti and the red kidneys, I generally find that it's easiest to pull the plants out and then to strip the pods off into a container. And it's a slow process. It takes a while to get through a patch like this, but you keep on going and it isn't long and you have your crop harvested. While this stage of the process does take some time, on a day like this I really don't mind it because I'm really enjoying the autumn sun. I don't know about you, but I always think that autumn sun is the most pleasant of all and really nice to be in it and enjoying it while we still have it. Considering the time that this process takes, one wouldn't really choose to grow dried beans for the purpose of trying to save money. It's our habit today to value our time based on what we can earn as a wage, when I think really we should value our time on the quality and quantity of food and the value of the food that we can actually produce. And that is completely different, and often there is no relationship between the cost of food to buy commercially and the actual nutritive value that it has. I choose to grow this type of crop because I am interested in practicing and learning survival gardening, being able to produce the foods that I need to sustain my body myself and not to save money. If I was gardening to save money, I would grow different crops, and that's probably a subject for a future video. I'm almost finished here. My bin is filling up. I have just one row to complete. Now, it's worth noting that in this patch there is considerable variation in the quality of the soil. Down on this bottom side, it's much richer and the beans grew a lot better. The plants were bigger and the crop was also heavier. Up on the top side, it's really lots of clay and it also would have been a bit drier, and so the plants didn't grow nearly as well. And if we look at these, we'll see a much smaller plant there and ultimately fewer pods. I mean, I'm actually holding 2 plants there in my hands, so you can see only 3 or 4 pods per plant, whereas down here we were getting potentially up to a dozen or so pods. So the quality of your soil does make a difference, but it didn't stop them growing, so you could get a crop off fairly poor soil. Anyway, I better get this finished and then we can finish the processing. That stage of the harvest is now complete, and Samuel has taken the fence down and allowed the hens to come in, and they can come in here and they can scratch around for a few weeks till I come back, and I will plant some oats to give some green feed across the winter. So when I get the chance, I'll come back and do that. Now while I'm here, it's worth looking at these scarlet runner beans. As you can see, they're looking pretty terrible. Not nearly as good as they did last year, and last year they could have even done better then. So I don't really understand why this year they've done so badly. I gave them some nice compost when I planted them. They would have had as much water as the other beans here that were growing, and there's been a reasonable amount of rain across the summer. The red kidney beans, the Borlotti beans did fine. These, no good. So I don't really understand why, but I certainly wouldn't want to have been relying on them for food. So these are the 2 tubs of dried pods. We've got the Borlottis here that I just harvested, and the red kidneys that were harvested, as I say, a few weeks ago. There's a bit more volume here, but of course pods don't count. I think there's more weight in this one, but until we've sorted it out, it's really hard to make a firm judgment. So I'm going to process these by hand the same as I did the red kidney beans last year. I'm going to use my kit here, which is a bag which I'll stuff full and beat the pods so that it breaks the beans out of them. Then put them back into the tub and stir them so that the beans actually fall to the bottom. That allows me to take the pods, the empty pods off that are nice and light and sitting on top, and throw those away. They can go on the compost. That leaves the dry beans with, of course, lots of dirt and dust. The sieve then will separate that out. There might be an odd larger piece of something that you don't want that you need to visually side out, though when you actually go to soak them for cooking, most of that stuff will actually float anyway. So here's the completed result. The weigh up is 5.4 kilos for the red kidney beans and 4.7 kilos for the Borlotti beans. Now, I have to say the red kidney beans, which produced that little bit extra, probably had the advantage in terms of soil. The soil that they grew in was, I think, a little bit better than the soil that the Borlotti beans had. So that probably made the difference. The total area of land that they grew in was 45 square meters, which is not a great amount. And it was pretty close to half-half in terms of what I planted. Now, I'm really pleased with that result, and it's a good amount of beans. The 10 kilos of beans, I'm not really sure what they're worth if you go and buy them from the supermarket, but for me, they're worth probably more because I know that these are organic, they haven't had any sprays on them, and that I've produced them myself. Now, I should say that there's one more thing that I will do with these beans, and that is to lay them out in the sun for a few days to make sure that the beans themselves are fully dry. With the Borlotti beans, I noticed that there's a few that I think have been a little bit damp in the pods, and the beans haven't, or are not as dry as they should be. So if I was to put those away and store them as they are, they would go mouldy. So I'll dry them out for a few days and make sure everything's totally dry before putting them into storage. Well, that's the bean harvest for the year, and I'm pretty pleased with it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back soon with another video.